The noise in the room barely registered. Laughter, wine glasses clinking, the buzz of a dozen conversations layered on top of one another, but all of that faded into the background, like a radio station out of range. All I could focus on was my daughter. She stood near the fireplace, clutching a small silver box in both hands. Her dress, light gold with tiny sparkles, caught the glow of the chandelier as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. 7 years old, hair pinned up with a ribbon, eyes moving around the room, trying to find a place to land. No one noticed her. Not really. The other kids were tangled up in new toys, shrieking and tugging at their cousins. The adults, mid-toast and mid-story, had all clustered near the table, drinks in hand, smiling the kind of smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. But I noticed, I always notice. She looked so much smaller than usual. Maybe it was the way she was standing, too still. Or maybe it was because she knew what was coming. She had rehearsed this moment. I could tell. The box had been in her room for weeks. She wouldn't tell me what was inside, only that Dad said I'd know when it was time. And apparently this was the time. She stepped forward. Nobody stopped her. Nobody even turned their head. That's the thing about being quietly forgotten. You start to disappear, even in a room full of family. But I saw her take that breath, that one deep breath where you try to steady your heart and keep your voice from shaking. And then she walked slowly across the rug. She walked up to Carol, my husband's mother, the one everyone else called Grandma like it came with unconditional love. My daughter stopped beside her, holding out the box like it weighed more than she could carry. "Grandma Carol," she said, "Dad told me to give you this if you ever forgot me again. I swear time actually stopped." A fork clattered onto a plate. A cousin's mouth hung open mid-bite. Even the baby, barely a year old, stared like something important had happened, and she knew it, even without the words. Carol laughed. A short, nervous laugh like she was brushing something off her shoulder. "What's this, sweetheart?" she asked, reaching out. Her voice wobbled just a little. She opened the box and froze. Inside were photographs, a few handwritten letters, one note folded cleanly in half with a name scrawled across the top. Her name. Carol's eyes skimmed over the contents, then stopped cold, and she recoiled. Actually recoiled, as if the box had punched her in the chest, her face so often tight with judgment, so used to controlling a room, twisted, not in anger, in recognition, in fear. She dropped the box. It hit the table, bounced off a plate, and landed sideways with the lid open. Letters slid onto the table. A photo flipped face up. Everyone could see it now. My daughter didn't move, didn't blink. She just stood there, eyes locked on Carol's, as if she was waiting for something. A reaction, an apology, a truth. She wouldn't get it, of course, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. I sat at the far end of the table. Still. Not because I didn't want to run to her, but because I needed them to feel it. All of them. The silence, the shame, the shift in air when something you've ignored for years finally stands in front of you and speaks. Carol didn't say anything, not a single word. Her hand hovered above the mess she'd made, but she didn't dare touch it, as if reaching out might make it more real. Someone asked, "What's going on?" Someone else whispered, "Is that her writing?" But no one had answered. And still, my daughter just stood there. She wasn't crying, wasn't smiling either. She looked relieved, like her part was over, like she'd held something heavy for too long, and now it wasn't hers to carry anymore. That was the moment the truth cracked through the performance, but it wasn't the beginning. It had started long before that night, in 100 smaller moments that chipped away at her place in this family, moments that I tried to forgive, tried to explain away, moments I swallowed in silence. I told myself it wasn't that bad, that she'd grow out of it, that maybe I was imagining it. But kids know, even if they don't have the words yet, they feel it, when they're loved less, when they're only tolerated, when they're treated like a shadow in a room full of light. I should have said something sooner, should have protected her more, but I didn't want to break the family. Funny, isn't it? The way women are taught to keep peace, even when our children are the ones being hurt by the silence. So when she opened that box, when she said those words, it wasn't just a moment of confrontation. It was the end of pretending, not just for Carol, but for me. Because in that instant, I stopped hoping this family would love her the way she deserved, and I started choosing her, out loud, fully. And I would never go back. The first time I knew something was wrong, really wrong, was Easter. She was 4. She had this little yellow dress with daisies printed on it, one of those cheap ones you buy last minute but somehow becomes their favorite. We'd brought her to the big family egg hunt in Carol's backyard. All the cousins were there. Dozens of those plastic eggs littered the lawn. She had found one pink shiny, with a chocolate coin inside. Her eyes lit up like it was a diamond. She held it high, proud, excited, and ran straight to Carol. "Look, Grandma Carol, I got a pink one." Carol didn't even turn around. She was too busy laughing at something my sister-in-law had said. Didn't even glance down. Just gave this little dismissive wave like shooing a fly. My daughter blinked, then stood there for a second, unsure what to do, still holding that pink egg. Eventually, she just walked away. She didn't cry, she didn't throw a tantrum. She just quietly placed the egg back into her little basket and went looking for another. That moment, small, quiet, easily missed, etched itself into me like a splinter under the skin. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe Carol hadn't heard her. Maybe she was distracted. Maybe I was being too sensitive. I had been told that before. By my husband. By his sisters. By myself. Carol's just old-fashioned. She doesn't mean anything by it. She treats all the grandkids the same. But she didn't. At Christmas, the cousins all got matching embroidered stockings. My daughter got a plain red one from the drugstore. At birthdays, Carol would post pictures on Facebook with captions like, "Celebrating my beautiful grandbabies." My daughter would be cropped out, or worse, just not there. There was always a reason, always an excuse. She's probably busy. She forgot. She's overwhelmed. And maybe that was true, but forgetting always seemed to happen to the same person. I didn't want to believe it, because if I believed it, if I truly accepted that my daughter was being treated differently, then I'd have to confront what that said about the people I had built my life around. So I played along, smiled through family dinners, sent thank you cards for gifts that never came, told my daughter to wave goodbye even when no one waved back. She never said much about it, but she noticed. One night, when she was 5, we were brushing her teeth before bed. Out of nowhere, she asked, "Is Grandma Carol mad at me?" I froze, toothbrush still in her mouth. Her little eyes looked up at me in the mirror. "What?" "No, sweetie, of course not." "Then why doesn't she hug me?" I didn't have an answer. The guilt settled into my chest like a stone, not just for what she'd asked, but for how long I'd been pretending not to see it. I brought it up to my husband, gently, carefully, because I knew how this would go. He sighed, rolled his eyes. "You're reading too much into everything again." "She's 7. She'll survive not being smothered in affection." "But she notices," I said. "She notices that she's being treated differently." And that's when he said it, the line that carved a permanent crack in my trust. "Well, she's not really Carol's grandchild." I stared at him. "Not really Carol's grandchild." He said it like a fact, like a shrug, like a reminder. She was his daughter. But not biologically. Not by blood. When we met, I was already a single mom. She was 2 when he stepped in, fell in love with both of us, proposed, and promised that nothing would ever feel different. And for a while, it didn't. Until it did. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just walked out of the room, went into the bathroom, locked the door, and sat on the cold tile floor. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stared at my reflection, asking myself what I had done, what I had exposed my daughter to, in the name of giving her a normal family. The next day, I saw her coloring at the kitchen table, quiet, focused. She had drawn our family, 4 people, me, her, my husband, and Carol. I looked closer. Everyone had smiling faces, except hers. Hers had a flat line for a mouth and tiny tears under both eyes. I asked her what it meant. She said, "That's how I feel when I'm with them." That was the moment something broke in me, not like glass shattering, more like a rope giving out, strand by strand after being pulled too tight for too long. I started pulling away, stopped pushing us into their plans, stopped begging them to remember her birthday, or invite her to sleepovers, or call her just to say hello. I stopped pretending we were part of the same family. But she didn't. She still called Carol grandma, still brought home crafts and said, "Can we give this to her?" Still waited by the door on holidays, hoping they'd stop by early. She still believed there was love there. And part of me, the cowardly part, wanted her to keep believing. But she's not stupid. She started noticing more. She started saying less. That's the most painful thing, I think. When a child stops speaking their hurt because they've learned no one will fix it. One night I was tucking her into bed, and she looked up at me and asked, "Do you think if I was really his, they'd love me more?" I didn't know how to breathe after that. Didn't know how to lie. Didn't know how to tell her she was wrong. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure anymore. That's when she started working on the box. Didn't tell me what it was for. Just said, "I'm saving things that prove I matter. For when someone forgets again." I thought she'd outgrow it. Thought she'd forget. She didn't. She gathered letters, ones her dad wrote during those first years, calling her his everything. Photos of the two of them building pillow forts, drawings she made of him that he used to hang in his office. The birthday card, where he signed it, "Love, Daddy Forever." She saved them all, tucked them neatly into that silver box, and sealed it with a rubber band. She said, "I'll give it to her if she forgets me again." And I didn't know what to say, because I knew she would. And I knew what that box meant. It wasn't just proof. It was a farewell. I wish I could say he changed, that when I told him what she said, something in him cracked open and he realized how far he'd let things slip. But he didn't. He just sighed, said something like, "She's being dramatic," and walked out of the room. After that, the distance grew like ivy. Slow at first, subtle. He stopped helping with bedtime, stopped asking about her day, stopped picking her up from school when he said he would. Always some excuse. Calls ran long. Traffic was bad. He forgot. She stopped leaving drawings on his desk, stopped waiting up for him, stopped calling him daddy out loud. She still loved him. You could see it in the way she looked toward the front door when she heard keys, in the way she lit up for half a second before she remembered she wasn't supposed to. She didn't cry, not even once. She just got quieter, and that terrified me, more than tears ever could. The rest of the family followed his lead. Carol used to text me, short, passive things like, "Will you bring her to the barbecue?" Or, "We got something small for her birthday." Then the texts stopped. She started sending invites to my husband only. Started posting family photos with my babies in the caption, "Always without my daughter in the frame." At Thanksgiving, she gave each of the cousins a personalized place setting. Little name tags in gold calligraphy. My daughter's name wasn't there. She had to sit at the end of the table, squeezed between two empty chairs. No plate, no name. I gave her mine. Carol didn't say a word, just smiled at everyone and passed the gravy like it was the most normal thing in the world. That night, my daughter crawled into bed beside me without asking. She laid her head on my chest and whispered, "Do I take up too much space?" It nearly destroyed me. I wrapped both arms around her and whispered, "No, baby, you are the space. You're the reason any of this even matters." And I meant every word, but I could feel her doubts sinking in anyway. A few days later, I found her going through the silver box again. She wasn't crying, she wasn't angry. She was just checking, like she was making sure it was still there, like she needed the reminder that once someone saw her, once she mattered, once her name was written in someone's hand, like it meant something. I sat down beside her on the floor and asked, "Are you sure you want to keep this?" She nodded. "If she forgets again, I'll give it to her. Then I'll stop waiting." I didn't ask what that meant. I think I already knew. That box wasn't just for Carol. It was her line in the sand. The last time she'd let herself hope. Weeks passed. And then came the party. Carol's annual family winter gathering. Not quite Christmas. Not quite New Year's. Just a tradition she invented to make herself the center of attention. Everyone was required to attend. Dressed up, on time. Gifts in hand. And every year I had the same thought, should we go? This time I said it out loud. My husband looked up from his phone and shrugged. "You can stay home if you want. I'll take her." I laughed. Sharp. Bitter. "You want to take her alone to a house where half of them pretend she doesn't exist?" He didn't respond. Didn't look up. And for the first time, I didn't fight with him. I didn't plead. I just stood up and said, "She's not going, unless I do." The morning of the party, I found my daughter already dressed. Same gold dress as last year. brushed her hair herself, shoes lined up by the door, and the box resting on the edge of her dresser. She'd polished it, wrapped a small ribbon around it like a gift. "Are you taking it?" I asked. She nodded. I didn't stop her. The drive there was quiet. No music, no small talk. Just the hum of tires and the occasional sound of her fingers tapping the lid of the box. When we pulled into Carol's driveway, she unbuckled her seatbelt and said, "I think I'm ready now." I walked in behind her, and the scene was the same as always. Too much food, too many people, too many fake smiles. The other kids ran up to their cousins like magnets. My daughter stood by the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. Carol was across the room, pouring wine, laughing too loudly. Didn't even glance in our direction. But my daughter didn't wait to be noticed. She walked forward, one step, then another, until she was standing right in front of her, box in hand. And that's when she said it. "Grandma Carol, Dad told me to give you this if you ever forgot me again." And everything stopped. Forks, conversations, music, all of it faded into a stillness that felt sacred. Carol's hands trembled as she opened the box. She pulled out a photo, one of my daughters sitting on her dad's shoulders, both of them laughing, faces pressed together like nothing could ever come between them. Then a birthday card, then a letter folded gently but worn at the creases, and finally the note scrawled in my husband's handwriting. A single sentence, "She's my whole world. If you ever treat her like less, I'll know who you really are." Carol looked up. Her lips parted like she was going to say something, but she didn't. She just stared. And then she stepped back, like my daughter was holding something dangerous. She dropped the box, let it fall. Didn't even try to catch it. And my daughter, she didn't flinch. She just watched, like she'd been waiting to see the truth fall out in front of everyone. No one spoke, no one moved, and I just stood there, watching her. This little girl who had carried silence and shame like a weight for years, finally putting it down, and I knew, in that moment, we weren't going back. Nobody picked up the box. Carol just stood there, frozen. One hand still hovering in the air like she didn't know what to do with it anymore. Everyone else looked at each other, at the floor, at their plates, at the wine they suddenly didn't want to drink. Nobody looked at my daughter. Nobody asked what was in the box. Nobody said, "I'm sorry." My daughter turned away first. She didn't say a word, didn't wait for permission. She just walked slowly back toward the front door, past the cousins who had never really been her cousins, past the adults who never really saw her. I followed, not because she needed me to, but because I was finally ready to stop leaving her to walk alone. We didn't slam the door. We didn't cause a scene. We just left. That silence we walked out with, it said more than 1,000 screaming matches ever could. The ride home was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet as before. She leaned her head against the window. Her hands were in her lap now, empty. The box was still back on that table, but I could see it in her reflection. She didn't need it anymore. She wasn't waiting. At a stoplight, I asked softly, "Are you okay?" She nodded once. Then after a moment said, "I thought it would hurt more." I didn't know what to say, so I just reached over and held her hand. That was enough. When we got home, she went straight to her room, took off the dress, hung it back on the hanger like it wasn't meant for playing, and curled up on the couch beside me in an old hoodie, tucked under the blanket we always kept folded too neatly on the armrest. She didn't talk about it, didn't bring it up again, and I didn't make her. That night, my husband came home hours later than expected. He didn't ask what happened, didn't mention the party, just muttered something about work and went straight to bed. I stayed on the couch, awake, still, listening to my daughter breathe beside me, thinking about every time I had let her down, every time I had told her, "It'll get better," when I knew it wouldn't. I don't think I fully understood what she had done, what it meant to hand someone a box of proof and say, "If you can't love me with this, then I won't keep trying." It was strength, quiet, unflinching strength, the kind most adults never even find. And it came from a child who had learned to carry disappointment with grace. The next morning, she asked if we could do pancakes, so we did. No ceremony, no pictures for social media, just us, in pajamas, eating breakfast like it was the first real morning we'd had in years. It felt like breathing again. We stopped going to family events after that. No explanations, no dramatic texts. We just stopped showing up, and nobody followed up. Carol never called. His sisters never reached out. Nobody asked why my daughter wasn't there anymore. The silence they gave us. It told me everything I needed to know. At first, my husband didn't say much. Maybe he thought I was just cooling off, that I'd come around, that we'd go back to playing nice eventually. But then birthdays came, holidays came, and it stayed quiet. She didn't ask for them anymore. Didn't ask if we were seeing them. She stopped looking toward the door. She stopped waiting. One night, I found her tearing pages out of her sketchbook. When I asked why, she said, "These were the drawings I made for them. I don't need them now." I sat beside her, watched her rip each page, not in anger, just closure. Then she asked, "Can I draw new ones, just for us?" I said yes, as many as you want. She started drawing little comics, silly ones. Ones where the main character was always a girl with a cape, rescuing her mom from falling buildings. She'd tape them on the fridge like trophies. I didn't realize how much of her had been held back, how much light had been dimmed until it started shining again. I think that's when I knew I had lost my husband long before that party. Not because he was cruel, but because he had chosen comfort over courage, because he let his silence speak louder than his promises. He didn't protect her, and in doing so, he didn't protect us. I didn't ask him to leave, but eventually he started staying away longer, working late, taking trips, and one day he just didn't come home. A short email, a forwarded lease agreement. He moved out, quietly. No drama, just like everything else with him. Absent, even when present. My daughter didn't cry. She just nodded and said, "I guess he forgot me too." And that broke me all over again, because she said it like it didn't surprise her, like she had already made peace with it. But here's the thing. That pain, it didn't hollow her. It made her brighter. She started speaking up more at school, started dancing again, started leaving notes in my lunchbox that said things like, "Love you, thanks for choosing me." And I did, every day, over and over. I chose her. A few months later, I got a message from one of Carol's daughters. It was short. "Hope you're doing okay. Just wanted to say, she's a strong kid. Maybe the strongest of all of us." That was it. No apology, no explanation. But it didn't matter, because by then we didn't need their validation anymore. We had built something better, quieter, more honest. There's a new photo on our fridge now. It's a drawing, actually. A little girl holding a box with light beaming out of it, standing in front of a shadowy crowd. She's smiling. She's not scared. She's glowing. Underneath, in crooked, colorful letters, it says, "I remembered myself." Some nights, I still replay it in my head. That moment by the fireplace. The gold dress, the silver box. Her voice, steady and small, saying words no child should ever have to say. "Dad told me to give you this if you ever forgot me again." She wasn't angry. She wasn't trying to make a scene. She was just done waiting to be loved the right way. And the truth is, she gave that family more grace than any of them ever deserved. She gave them years, smiles, drawings, hope, and when they couldn't hold any of it, she let go. Not with spite, not with revenge, but with calm. That's what still catches in my throat. I spent so long trying to keep everything together, trying to smooth things over, trying to explain away what I couldn't admit out loud, that love in some families is conditional. They'll love you if you're easy, if you fit, if you don't remind them of what they don't understand. And my daughter, she never fit the picture they had framed in their minds. She was too much, too smart, too observant, too honest. They didn't know what to do with her, so they chose not to see her at all. But she saw them. She always did. And when she finally stopped asking for their love, that's when she got free. I used to think family was about forgiveness, about giving people chance after chance. Because that's what good people do, right? You make excuses. You hope. You say, they didn't mean it. But then you look at your child, the one you're supposed to protect, and you realize every time you made an excuse for them, you made her feel like she had to earn something that should have been hers by birthright. Love. Real, unqualified, show up every time kind of love. I'm not angry anymore. I was for a while, but it burned out. What's left now is something clearer, cleaner. We live a smaller life now, quieter holidays. No long tables. No awkward conversations. Just the two of us, mostly. And it's enough. More than enough. Last Christmas, she gave me a card. She had drawn the two of us as astronauts, floating out in space, holding hands. There was no Earth behind us, just stars. On the inside, she wrote, "We're still floating, but we have each other." I cried. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't anymore. She doesn't talk about them much now. Sometimes she'll mention a memory, a funny cousin story, a gift she liked once, but there's no weight in it, no ache. She's moved on, and in a way, I have too. I used to think that walking away meant breaking something, but now I see it differently. Sometimes walking away is what stops the breaking. Sometimes silence is safer than begging. And sometimes the most radical kind of love is choosing peace, even if it means starting over. I wish things had been different. Of course I do. I wish Carol had bent down that Easter day to admire a pink plastic egg and say, "That's beautiful, sweetheart." I wish my husband had fought for her like he promised he would. I wish she hadn't needed a silver box at all. But she had one, and she used it. And in doing so, she gave herself the closure we were too afraid to find for her. She's almost 9 now. Still bright, still sharp, still full of love, somehow. And me, I don't flinch anymore when someone says family is everything, because I know better. Family is not a bloodline. It's not obligation. It's not who shows up for the photo. It's who shows up when no one else does. Who sees you fully, even when you're quiet. Who remembers you, even when the room forgets. And if that means we're a family of 2, then so be it. I still don't know what Carol did with that box. Maybe she threw it away. Maybe she tucked it into a drawer and pretended it didn't happen. But that's not our story anymore. We stopped carrying that weight. We're writing new chapters now. One warm morning. One safe bedtime. One pancake breakfast at a time. And if you're listening to this, if your child is being treated like they don't belong, if you've been sitting in silence waiting for it to get better, let me say this as gently as I can. It won't. Unless you speak. Unless you choose them. Every time. Loudly. Clearly. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. Because the world will teach your child 100 ways to question their worth. But you are their voice before they find their own. You are their mirror before they believe what they see. You are the one who reminds them. You are not hard to love. You never were. And if they ever build a box of their own, you make sure it's filled with proof that they mattered every single day, even if no one else saw it, especially then. Because one day, they'll stop waiting. And when they do, I hope they walk away with their head high, knowing someone somewhere finally chose them.